My name is Mackenzie. Welcome back to my channel, and thank you so much for being here. Today we are doing my June wrap up. So in June I read, a few books. I read 7 books for a total of 2,272 pages. I read 5 different genres. One of those books was a 5-star, 3 were 4-star, and 3 were 3-star. So I think this is the first month in 2022 where I've had quite a few 3-star books. So let's just get into it. We'll talk about it. We'll discuss. As always, we are going to talk about the books in the order in which I finished them. So some of these books I started earlier in the month, but I didn't finish until later in the month. And most of them I was reading consecutively. I was reading quite a few books at the same time in June, trying to get all of the books I wanted finished. So the first book that I read in June, or first book I finished in June, was The Unbroken by C.L. Clarke. So I was originally going to read this book for the Nebula Award finalist. This was a finalist, and I was trying to read all of the finalists and see what I thought. I felt like this had a few issues, and then not to mention that when put up against the other finalists, this felt very, very YA. These issues that I had a really big time with were the characters were very underdeveloped. There was a point in the later half of the book where our character was talking about how much she's grown and developed as a person, and I was like, where? When did you get all of that character development? Because you have acted the same way the whole time. It was so superficial. I felt like I didn't know these characters very well. They just had one line of description about who they were, and then that was kind of it. The themes that the author was trying to discuss were good themes, but it wasn't well discussed. It was just kind of brought up and then never touched on again. And then at the end of the book, it kind of made you feel like the author wanted you to think oh wow, that was great, but it never got there. And then finally, the plot was very confusing and all over the place. With weak characters and a theme that wasn't thoroughly developed, there were a ton of different plot points that were trying to bring up themes and aspects that just were never truly developed, and so felt very confusing to be brought up. I felt like a lot of it was just different. A lot of what happened in the plot, if it was really developed, it could have become a longer series. I know this is a series, but all the things that happened in here were just kind of it simultaneously felt like there was too much and not enough that was happening in this book. So I ended up giving this a 3-star. It wasn't completely awful, but I felt like it needed just so much more. While also it needed to be much shorter. Absolutely needed to be much shorter. Also, I hated the romance in this. I hated it. It was awful. 0 stars on the romance. Next, I finished Night of the Mannequins. I always want to say Night of the Living Mannequins. But Night of the Mannequins by Stephen Graham Jones. This is a novella. This is a novella that I read when I was doing chores a couple of weeks ago. It was good. I gave it a 3-star. I previously DNF'd All the Good Indians, something like that, by Stephen Graham Jones because of character. And I felt like I had the same issue in this book as well. And the only reason I was really able to get through it was because it was a novella. It was really short. But we're following this perspective of this main character who, him and his group of friends take this mannequin to the movie theaters, and then they see the mannequin walk out of the movie theater. We're following a descent into madness, basically. And we were supposed to not and be suspicious of certain characters, and that was all well and good, but then out of nowhere there would be things that the character would say or think that would just be so sexist and so disgusting for no reason at all. We already didn't like this character, and you're gonna give it that extra step of wow, I can't even tell if the author does or doesn't feel this way, and that makes me uncomfortable. Don't like. It was pretty creepy, but like I said, the sexist comments, I don't care for them. Then I finished Confessions by Kinae Minato. We read this for the Literally Dead book club. I freaking loved this. This was my 1 5-star for the month. It was so good. It was so good. So basically, it is 6 chapters, 6 perspectives of the story of this teacher in Japan whose daughter is murdered on campus. And it starts with her confronting her class and saying, I know someone in our class killed my daughter. And it goes from there. And it's so good. It's amazing. It is so well told. The way the perspectives shift into one another because of how each one picks up where the last one leaves off, and it tells like just a short timeline of the story, and it's just so good. It's so good, and I loved it, and it was great, and I just can't recommend it enough. This was great. Okay, the next book that I finished was Plague Birds by Jason Sanford. I gave this a 4-star. I really enjoyed this. So this book was about I feel like I've brought it up in a few different videos now, but basically humans have lost their humanity, and they have been like genetically altered so much with animals that they have lost their civilization, the civility. They need AIs to teach them how to be civilized again. So basically there are AIs in these like small town city communities that help grow the human species back to get back to being like a big population again. And we're following our main character. Her name is Krista, and she is turned into a plague bird, which is a human that is mixed with something called a blood AI, which is kind of like an AI, but it lives in your blood. It's kind of like a AI parasite, and it gives you like superpowers basically. And we are following Krista and her blood AI as they're investigating this like group that is threatening the lives of the rest of the humans that are alive right now. I've really enjoyed this. I felt like this was a lot of world building. There wasn't a lot of like plot, but it was heavy on the world building and what kind of world this was and how humans like interact with each other and what their lives are like, and like a lot of questioning what makes someone human. And it just, it was a lot, and I loved it. Very like thematic and world building heavy. Very character heavy, not a lot of plot, but super, super good. Really enjoyed it. Kind of creepy, kind of very creepy actually. And I just freaking loved it. This was also a Nebula Award finalist. It did not win, but it's a self-pub that was nominated, and that's just amazing. Next, I finished Machinehood by SB Divya. I gave this 3 stars. This was also a Nebula Award finalist. This was interesting and weird, and I felt like the pacing was off. I felt like this could have really done well as being a duology, or if we could really focus on either one point or the other. So this starts with our main character. We have a dual perspective, and one of our main characters is a bodyguard basically in the future, and it's kind of just for show because bodyguards aren't necessary, nobody gets murdered anymore, big brothers everywhere. But then all of the like AIs basically revolts, and they have like a little revolutionary party, and someone is murdered, and our bodyguard is like, I have to figure out why. And then all of a sudden we're off planet talking about becoming something that is not human and not AI, but a mix of both. Kind of like what the Plague Birds was talking about. But I felt like both of these plot points were too different from each other to be working together. I know everything was the overall arc of the revolutionaries of the Machinehood, but there were 2 very distinct plot points, I felt, and the pacing was very off. I also didn't like the character development in this. Like, for whatever reason, one of our main characters just wanted to save the world, and I'm like, that's great, but why? Like, you have a loving family who wants you to be safe, and you're dying, and you are still trying to sacrifice your life? Why? Why would you do that? I don't understand. And there was like one whole page of her talking about her mom and how her mom was like a doctor and she's never smart enough to be a doctor, so being in the military has always been her way of helping people. But one page out of a 400 page book does not motive make, and I needed a ton more. So 3 stars, it got the job done. I did like a lot of the themes that were brought up, but the character development was so lacking. Then I read The Last House on Needless Street. I read this on a mix of ebook and audio. This is by Catriona Ward. I gave this a 4 star. I did really enjoy this. I thought that the pacing was cool. I thought the perspectives were interesting. I thought that the storyline was cool, and what ended up happening was cool. I am never entirely a fan of the plot twist being mental illness. So I think that's what keeps it from being a 5 star. But the way that the plot twist was mental illness, it wasn't very harmful, I thought. And if anything, it really played up on that trope of, in a scary movie, the person is mentally ill and that's why everything is happening, you know? And I felt like it really played on that trope enough to kind of be more like a satire on it. Not really a satire, because it is definitely not funny. It is scary, it is dark, it is creepy. There were moments of like pure disgust and horror, but it was also really good and thrilling and scary, and I did really enjoy it. I'm glad I've got to read from Catriona Ward now, because she has more books that keep coming out, like Sundial, and I'm excited for that one as well. So I love this one, and I'll just keep reading from her. Oh no. Last House on Needless Street was the last book that I read, but then I also read The Woman in Cabin 10 right before it by Ruth, Ware. I gave this one also a 4 star. So this one was really good. It was really interesting. I was so nervous while reading this book because the whole time I'm reading it, I was thinking, like, please don't let her be crazy. Like, I hate when the woman is just crazy and that is, like, the reasoning why everything. Like nothing actually happened. It was all a dream. She's not taking her right medication. Like, I hate those tropes. And so the whole time I was just worried that that's how this was going to end, and it wasn't, and it was great and amazing. So basically we have our main character. I don't know her name. Oh, it's Lo, like Laura. So Lo is on a maiden voyage cruise with just like a couple people, I think only 10. And someone, she thinks she hears someone being thrown overboard, and she tries to tell everybody, and it comes to find out that cabin has been empty. No one's in that cabin. No one is missing. So no one's thrown overboard. So we're following her, trying to figure it all out. It starts so fast-paced. Like, immediately we start with something unrelated but very fast-paced, and it kind of leads into you thinking like, oh, she is crazy. This book was done really well. I really enjoyed it. I felt like it was very fulfilling at the end, which is very lovely, and I'm glad I read it. I love Ruth Ware. I continue to love Ruth Ware, and I will continue to read everything by her. All right, so those are all of the books that I read this month. Tell me what you read this month, your favorites, disappointments, and what you're currently reading. And I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you have a good rest of your day, and I hope to see you in the next one. Bye!